So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to those who have joined us before, and welcome for those who are joining us for the first time. Today is something of an extra treat. Our session today will last a little bit longer because we have a panel of guests who will speak on what it means to be a public defender in an era where we're reimagining public safety. Today is also different because I will have a kind of evening or afternoon off. I will be handing over the responsibility for moderator and facilitator to Professor Dehlia Umunna, who will take over the task. She is much better equipped to ask amazing questions than I ever could be in this situation. And I think we're going to have a really wonderful conversation, not just because of the topic that we initially planned, but also because it gives us a chance to kind of debrief and think through what the implications are for yesterday's verdict. So let me introduce our guest moderator. Professor Dehlia Umunna is a clinical professor of law at Harvard Law School and the faculty deputy director of the law school's Criminal Justice Institute, where she supervises third-year law students in the representation of adult and juvenile clients in criminal and juvenile proceedings in Massachusetts courts, including the Supreme Judicial Court. Her teaching interests and research focus on criminal law, criminal defense and theory, mass incarceration, and race issues. She serves as a faculty advisor to some student organizations as well. Professor Umunna coaches the Harvard Law School National Criminal Justice Trial Advocacy and the HLS Black Law Student Association trial teams, and has led them to numerous regional and national awards. In addition to her work at Harvard Law School, Professor Umunna serves as a faculty member for Gideon's Promise, formerly the Southern Public Defenders Training Center, and is a frequent presenter at public defender training conferences and social justice reform panels around the country. She was recently appointed by the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court to the newly established Bar Admissions Curriculum Committee to assist in crafting the uniform bar exam. You might be wondering how it is that she gets any sleep at night, because that's what I'm wondering. Prior to coming to Harvard, Professor Umunna spent several years at the Public Defender Service for the District of Columbia as a trial attorney. At PDS, she was a felony 1 trial attorney representing indigent clients in hundreds of cases, from misdemeanor charges of theft, assault, and drug possession to kidnapping, child sexual abuse, rape, and homicide. Some of her cases received nationwide media attention. She also served as faculty training attorneys under the District of Columbia Criminal Justice Act. Among her recognitions, and there have been many, Professor Umunna has received Harvard Law School's Dean's Award for Excellence in acknowledgement of her outstanding service to the HLS community, where she has excelled as a student supervisor, staff manager, lecturer, coach, and mentor, and the Southern Public Defender Training Center Outstanding Faculty Mentor of the Year Award. Let me now introduce to you Professor Dehlia Umunna, who will take over the task of moderator today. Welcome, Professor Umunna.
So thank you so very much, Professor Smith. After that wonderful introduction, I intend to ask for a raise. I do not know who you were talking about.
You should.
I'm like, wait, that person does all of that?
You, that's right.
Wait a minute, that person deserves a raise. So thank you so much, Professor Smith, and to you and your wonderful team, to you and Brian and Gabrielle, all the folks who come together to put this wonderful program together. I think this is maybe the 20th one. And boy, what a wonderful a time to actually have this conversation. Usually when we talk about community safety, public defenders tend to be excluded from that conversation. So it is wonderful that your office, your department is recognized the important role that public defenders play. And thank you for having us. I am just delighted to be able to moderate this panel. We have wonderful guests with us today, and I can't wait for you to hear from each and every one of them. So Professor Smith, I just applaud you. I have watched you since you got to Harvard Kennedy School, and you've been doing fabulous, fantastic work. So please keep it up. I am excited to work with you on this. So Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I am so excited to be part of this today. As I said, we have wonderful guests, and I will certainly introduce them very briefly. The goal, I want to give you a roadmap for what we're going to actually do today. So I will introduce each of our guests. Then I will ask them to sort of talk with you, share with you for about 3 to 5 minutes what it is that they do, highlights from their offices concerning the subject matter for which we are here. And then I will have a few questions that I want to ask them, but I can tell you what's really on my heart will be taking questions from you, the audience, because quite frankly, left to me, we can talk for a very, very long time. We will not, because I actually have to be on another panel at the law school exactly at 6. But it's my preference that we engage the audience so that we can talk about questions that you have on your mind. So without any further talking here, I want to introduce our panel to you. First, let me just make sure I have folks, I can see folks on my, as I introduced them on my Zoom. First is Mr. Anthony Benedetti. Anthony, it is so wonderful to see you. I was just sharing with him that it's been a while that we have been on a panel together, so it's nice to have you on this panel. Mr. Benedetti is the Chief Counsel of the Committee for Public Counsel Services, CPCS, which is Massachusetts agency responsible for providing legal services to those who are unable to afford it in cases where there is a constitutional or statutory right to an attorney. After graduating from Boston College and Suffolk University Law School, he worked as a public defender trial attorney in the CPCS Brockton office, representing clients in the Plymouth County District. And by the way, I was in Plymouth County District Office yesterday, District Court yesterday before Judge Goburn. So whatever good work you've done there continues till today. In 1998, Mr. Benedetti became CPCS's general counsel. And in that capacity, he's responsible for providing legal counsel and support to the chief counsel and maintaining a leadership role in carrying out the agency's fiscal, human resources, and operational responsibilities internally and externally. In addition, he was the agency's representative before the executive, legislative, and judicial branches on budget and legislative issues. He was selected as chief counsel in 2010. Mr. Benedetti is an active, longtime member of the Massachusetts Bar Association and the Boston Bar Association, as well as the Massachusetts Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. On the national level, Mr. Benedetti is a member of NACDOL and NLADA and the National Association for Public Defense. Mr. Benedetti, welcome. Next, we have on our panel, Porsha-Shaf'on Venable. Ms. Venable is a supervising attorney of the criminal defense practice of the Bronx Defenders. And by the way, Ms. Venable, 2 wonderful women whom I love and adore, Ms. Heather Pinckney and Brandy Harden, speak so highly of you. So I'm excited that you are able to join us today.
Thank you for having me.
Ms. Venable was born, raised, and still resides in the Bronx. Ms. Venable received her JD from California Western School of Law and a master's in social work from New York University School of Social Work. She returns to the Bronx Defenders for the 4th time in her career, initially working at the Bronx Defenders as a forensic social worker, and then she decided to go to law school, not sure what, Then she returned to Bronx Defenders as a law clerk, and after law school, she was a staff attorney in the criminal defense practice. In 2017, she joined the Neighborhood Defender Service of Harlem as a staff attorney. Ms. Venable, I am so excited to have you on this panel. I have heard so many great things about you, so welcome. Finally, we have Mr. Brendon Woods. Mr. Woods is the Chief Public Defender of the Alameda County Public Defender's Office, with nearly 20 years of experience in criminal defense litigation. Mr. Woods has held positions of increasing responsibility in the Alameda Public Defender's Office since he joined the office as a post-bar law clerk in 1996. In December 2012, he was appointed public defender. He, by the way, is the first African-American public defender in Alameda County's history. Mr. Wood leads 160 attorneys, investigators, and support staff operating out of 5 branches throughout the county to provide superior legal defense in more than 3,000 new files monthly. In 2013, his office was named Law Office of the Year by the Alameda County Bar Association. His commitment to providing inspired holistic representation to his clients led him to hire full-time social workers to link clients with essential services throughout their criminal cases to provide alternatives to incarceration. He has established several programs while in office, and his Immigration Representation Unit was named Program of the Year in 2016 by the California Public Defenders Association. Mr. Woods, welcome. So we were supposed to also have Kim with us today, Kimberly Clark, who is a public defender with the public defender in DC. Unfortunately, Ms. Clark had a family emergency, and we wish her the absolute best as she can't be here today. So panelists, we are all ready to go. But I will be remiss, and I know we are here to talk about community safety and the role of the public defender, but the Lord knows I will be remiss if I do not ask you, first and foremost, what is your reaction to yesterday's verdict? Mr. Benedetti.
Thank you for that question. Yes, I agree. I don't know how we would get through this panel without mentioning that obvious situation yesterday. I sent out a statement, and obviously we're, as defense attorneys, we're in the strange position of being pleased with a guilty verdict. And so talked about how it really isn't about justice. There was no justice. Mr. Floyd can't come back. His family is never going to be able to enjoy his company again. But it was about accountability. And so at least with respect to that, it was a good day. And so in terms of what I sent out, I said, we aren't in the habit or in the business of celebrating guilty verdicts, but we are in the business of doing everything we can to hold law enforcement accountable, and we'll continue to do that. But it was a small measure of satisfaction that the jury got it right yesterday.
So thank you for answering that question. You raised the particular tension that we have at face as public defenders. The greatest joy of my life is being the mother of 2 teenagers, 2 incredibly bright and smart kids. One who is 18 years old, will be 19 on the 4th of July, and is finishing her freshman year in college. And my son, who is 6'1", a senior, 17 years old, a senior at Roxbury Latin, and will be starting college in August. And so having conversations with them about not only the verdict, but the role of the public defender, including questions like, Mom, would you have represented Mr. Chauvin, right? And so these are really smart kids. They've been around public defenders all their lives. They know the questions to ask to get excitement going at dinner time. So Ms. Venable, I ask you the same question I posed to Mr. Benedetti. What was your reaction to the verdict yesterday, and what does it mean in this particular space?
I'm Black, and on the one hand, you know, seeing people not being held, I'm actually tiring of the word accountable, because I'm not 100% sure he has been held accountable. But seeing, I will just say this, it's hard to sort of articulate the push and pull of my feelings as a Black woman and as a Black woman public defender, because I know that verdict does not get us freedom. It does not get us free, because I inhaled, I exhaled, and before my next inhale, somebody else's child was taken away from them. So I am incapable of really articulating joy, articulating anger, articulating rage, articulating frustration, articulating feeling what has been done is just, because I don't know if responding to violence with more violence is the way, right? I don't know. And I don't know what honestly to feel. And that's as real as I can be. And I think that it is unfair for me to, yuck someone's yum, right? And say Black people shouldn't feel joy. Black people shouldn't rejoice in this guilty verdict. But I know what I know. And I know that guilty verdict doesn't get us free. So it is hard.
Thank you, Ms. Venable. I think you've captured sort of the ambivalence that folks feel towards this verdict, especially if you are a person of color, particularly if you are if you are a Black person. And so, Mr. Woods, I turn to you because and ask you the same question. I wonder what this verdict really means in this space. When I first emigrated to the United States in 1992, I landed squarely in Los Angeles, California, and in March of 1992. And if you recall, March of 1992, we were smack dab in the middle of the Rodney King case. And my perception of the United States and justice and the criminal justice system and what it looks like was really shaped by the events of the Rodney King case. And then 28 years later, we now are here, right? Where we have police kill about 1,000 people every year. As a matter of fact, to be exact, 181 Black people have been killed since George Floyd was murdered May 25th. 181 Black people have been killed by police since George Floyd was killed. So I ask you then, what is your response to this verdict? As a public defender, as a Black man, and what are your thoughts on what this means for now and for the future?
Sure. So first off, thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here, part of this panel, and with Tony and Porsha. I haven't seen Porsha in forever, so say what's up. Good to see you. So when it comes to this question, I think I am slightly tormented in answering this question, because as a Black man, and having police officers put their hands on you when they have no legitimate reason to do it, and the anger you feel from that, you want revenge, you want accountability, you want quote unquote justice. But when you work in the space we do as public defenders, and you form a certain value system and belief system. So I do not believe in human caging as a solution. I do not believe in incarceration. I do not believe in taking people, human beings, and putting them in cages is going to make anyone safer. When we think about this verdict, and I keep hearing how there's been justice and accountability, I question that, because then we are in some ways legitimizing the system that has failed us, that has failed Black people, has inflicted violence on Black people, and it will continue to do so if we legitimize prosecution as a tool and a weapon. We don't get justice from that. And so I've been struggling with that. And I just think that this verdict puts no accountability on the system. It maybe holds one person accountable, but there are cops out there who are going to continue to murder Black people independent of what's happened yesterday. So this system of policing and abuse is rotten to the core. We cannot reform this. We have to destroy it and build something new. And so this one verdict does not create a pathway to that. I think we have to not let our guard down. We can't be happy with one outcome or one verdict. We have to keep pressure on this system and realizing that it is going to continue to hunt, harm, and kill people of color unless we change it completely. So that's the way I feel about it. There's been one man, and I'll be honest, there's always something, I think, about me as a defense attorney. When you hear a guilty verdict, it is not pleasing. Even the ill will I might have for that one individual, as he was shackled and caged in that moment, it did not feel good, because sure, there's one white person that was shackled and caged, but there are thousands and millions of black people being shackled and caged right now for less. And that's always my lens that I see it through. And I just hate when we legitimize a system that is to its core oppressive and harms people of color. So those are my thoughts on it.
Thank you
And
so
we
much.
could talk for hours. I mean, we could go. I think if you are truly an abolitionist, there's a real tension there. There's a real tension there. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
So-
Okay, that's the conversation we're gonna have. Let me take off my earrings. All right, let's go. Let's go, South. All right.
Well,
That's
so
where
you
we
know,
at. Let's go.
so Ms. Venable, you know the thing is, when you get invited to somebody's house, you kind of got to play by their rules. And my mandate, and I said to Professor Smith, there's no way I'm talking about community safety without first of all addressing this verdict. So please, I will apologize to you later, but for now, we will start off with the verdict. I just operate in that space. But I do want to make sure that because I'm an invited guest and I do want to be invited back, I want to make sure that I stay within the framework of what she has asked us to talk about today, which is community safety and the role of the public defender. And I want to kind of go off something that Mr. Woods said, which is putting pressure on the system, right? What does it mean to put pressure on the system? And Mr. Woods, I'm actually going to start with asking you to talk about this a little bit. In your space, I read your bio to the folks, and I talked about the amazing things that you are currently doing at the Alameda office. But I can tell you that is sort of an anomaly. It's an outlier. It's not what obtains in every public defender office, right? I have the privilege of spending 2 weeks during the summer with a program called Gideon's Promise, where I go and train public defenders in under-resourced areas, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, train newly minted public defender offices. And so I wonder if you can share with us in about 3 minutes or so, and then I'm going to come to Ms. Venable, and we'll end with Mr. Benedetti, on what it is that your office is doing to put pressure on the system, the kind of pressure that will move the needle. We are not yet in an abolitionist society, and we might be making progress to get there, but it seems to me that the system may respond to pressure that you described. So please share with us in the next 3 minutes, sort of highlight work that your office is doing, highlighting some of the ways in which you've put pressure on the system.
Sure, that's a little bit different question I thought I was going to come into, but I think when it comes to ways we've put pressure on the system, I'm going to switch my answer a little bit. We'll not talk about the programs we've done, but about the pressure we've applied. I think the biggest way we've applied pressure is in being in spaces where we weren't historically invited. And I'm talking about Sacramento and legislation. Those are spaces where public defenders weren't there previously. And we were fighting cases, litigating cases, and going to court, trying cases, and going, these laws are really screwed up, and complaining about them in that space without making the efforts to change them. So that's one thing I think we've been doing, and we've had a lot of success. And then also being visible and active anytime some sort of law, a local court rule, or any sort of change that was put in place that was going to hurt our clients, being active and vocal about that, and mobilizing not just public defenders, but community groups also, and being active in that space. I think we try as much as possible to have our policies be community driven, because especially community groups, they have boots on the ground. They know a lot of times better than what attorneys know, and they bring that energy to us. So to give some real, I guess, concrete examples, we have been particularly active, which has been my calling, I guess, in some ways, to make sure we get our juries more diverse. I'm in Alameda County, Oakland, California, and we have such a hard time getting Black people on juries. It is incredibly difficult. I had a lawyer recently who tried a case, 112 jurors, only 3 were Black. That is insane. Our young Black client didn't get to see a single Black juror during questioning because of the way we do it during COVID. It was just insane. So we've been able to get laws passed recently that have really expanded the jury pool. So for example, real quick, 2 years ago, we got a law passed that allowed people with felony convictions to serve as jurors. Historically in California, if you had a felony conviction, no matter how old that conviction was, would it be 10 years, 15 years, 20 years ago, could have been dismissed off your record. You could still not serve as a juror. That law prevented over 30% of Black men in California from serving as jurors. So being in that space, deconstructing the laws and attacking them to make sure we have more representation is one of the places where we've been really active and forceful. I've got a lot more, but I know I'm trying to be mindful of time, so I'm going to stop there.
Thank you so very much. So Ms. Venable, the same question to you. What programming, what sort of, actions has your office taken to put pressure on the system? What would you like to highlight about what the Bronx Defenders is doing in this particular space when it comes to community safety?
So one of the basic tenets, and I think our most important roles, just sort of piggybacking off of Mr. Woods said, is those things, and reminding the criminal legal system that it is violent, that it is coercive, that it is exploitive, and just completely damaging to communities of color, to Black communities, to brown communities. And one of the things that we are encouraged to do, that we are trained to do, is remind every single system, every single day, that that is exactly what they are. And that is why just even going back to your original question about this verdict and about what it means is that every single day, these systems, the criminal legal system, the immigration system, the family system, the housing system, the employment system will continue to be racist. It will continue to be anti-Black. It will continue to rip communities and families apart. And so we need to perpetually remind them that this is what they're doing in our walk and our talk, right? And so what that means is, and I understand that you have said that we are not in a place of abolition, but both need to be true. We need to completely dismantle it, but also remind them why. With every single case, with every single program, why. I was about to curse, and I'm so sorry, I pulled back on that. But we need to remind them why they are living wrong. And so, a part of that is educating, judges, prosecutors, and other, state actors that we don't need y'all. Thinking about restorative justice, thinking about those types of ways to resolve conflict in communities that divorce the criminal legal system from what we do every day. Those types of things are what we do. The other, important thing that I feel often gets left out of these conversations are those that are directly impacted. ensuring that every single time there's a piece of legislation that is put down, that those that are directly impacted, their voices are elevated, they are at the center, and they are heard. Yes, we are lawyers, and yes, they don't call us counselor for no reason, but we really need to change our mindset and shift. And so if we're talking about shifting the criminal legal system to abolishing, we also need to shift our thinking as public defenders into remembering that those that are directly impacted need to be centered. And we need to remind the courts, remind these systems that those are the people that need to be listened to.
Thank you. Mr. Benedetti. And just so you know, Ms. Venable, we will have forgiven you if you cursed. That is okay. Sometimes I shock my students, especially in the last month with everything that's been happening. I will generally ask for forgiveness later. So, Mr. Benedetti.
Thank you. I agree with pretty much everything that has been said. And I want to go back to when you first opened up, Professor, you talked about how public defenders haven't traditionally been involved in this space. And I know John Rapping is someone who is always preaching that we belong in this space as much, if not more, than everyone else who's involved in this space. So there's a lot to talk about in 3 to 5 minutes, but certainly I think I want to talk about, and we have touched upon that a little bit, is what is public safety? The system works from a very flawed, comes at it from a very flawed public safety concept. And generally, as all of us who work in this area, we know it's for the most part defined as things that poor and Black and brown people do. It's not generally what happens in generally white suburbs where people feel safe walking down the street. They don't have to feel threatened by getting pulled over by police while they're driving. They aren't stopped and harassed by police while walking in their neighborhoods. Public safety looks like schools that are properly resourced and funded, adequate housing, food security, proper health care. It doesn't look like more police. It doesn't look like more people locked up. It certainly doesn't look like what happened in Minnesota. I mean, I don't think anyone is going to argue that's public safety. We all know that even if what happens pre-trial, people being locked up, again, primarily poor, primarily Black and brown people. The disastrous impact it has on a person's life, it makes communities less safe. A few days in jail, it can affect their family, their housing, employment, their health. They can lose their jobs. If you're a student, you're missing classes, parents can lose custody of their children. I mean, just the way the system is working now is doing nothing to help overall communities with public safety. And it's not like we don't know what the problem is. If you go back to the LBJ Commission, I think it was 1968, where they made clear that all of these social services were necessary to help bring down crime and improve neighborhoods. If you look at the child welfare system, 5% of children who go through the child welfare system graduate college. It's pretty clear what we are doing is not working. And so in terms of what we are doing here in Massachusetts, I think we have been lucky enough to have a legislature that has been fairly supportive in allowing us to engage in the kinds of things that we're talking about here. We have for a long time been involved in policy advocacy, and we have dramatically increased our involvement there. For instance, it's just the beginning of the 2-year legislative session in Massachusetts. We are tracking a little over 400 legislative proposals. We've filed 40 bills of our own. We're involved in a number of bills in which we're part of a coalition. And there are probably 60 other groups that we work with, community groups, advocacy groups, bar associations on legislation and other policy advocacy. And we've had some real luck in the last few years in the areas of expungement, raising the age, diversion. We were able to, along with other groups, get some language in the state budget, directing the Department of Corrections to decarcerate. Whether or not they're doing that is a different question. Some favorable language around medical parole and compassionate release. Again, we've had to follow up to ensure that these things are actually being done. We're very active with systemic litigation, something we've been doing for a number of years. a few years ago, we had a strategic planning session. And one of the things that came out of that was to expand that particular division to include all of our practice areas. So not just adult criminal, but our juvenile area, our children and family law, our mental health, realizing that our clients in many cases go through all different practice areas. And so we wanted to look to where we could challenge unjust and usually unconstitutional practices. You mentioned in the invitation, assessment of fines and fees, pretrial detention, bail, stop and frisk, all of which we have been involved in tackling. The Long case, which is a fantastic case in Massachusetts that came down in September 2020, where the court, the top Massachusetts court, the SJC, broadened a defendant's ability to raise a racial profiling claim in motor vehicle stops, recognizing the long history of racial discrimination and recognizing that it was almost impossible for a defendant to raise the claim because of the high burden. That has changed now. And so internally, we have a working group which is involved in training attorneys and other staff on how to use this case and to really make some positive change for clients. We're suing the Hampden County Springfield Police Department, the Hampden County District Attorney's Office in conjunction with the Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts because of their unwillingness to take steps to address issues with the Springfield Police Department, which was the subject of the Department of Justice investigation and a report. And so that's another way that we have been doing, we have been taking to try and get some real change. Communication, we're doing a lot more communication, and it's really about informing the public about what we do, informing the public about policies that are either being proposed or policies that harm our client or client communities, highlighting our good work so people know that we actually care about public safety too, except we define it in a much different way, and telling the stories of our clients, because as everyone knows, oftentimes the press does not do that in a complete way, and they're presented as evil. And so we're doing our best to tell more of their stories. And finally, we do quite a bit in which we are involved with other stakeholder agencies. We're on a number of working groups, commissions, committees. The last I checked, it was somewhere north of 85. Some put together by the Supreme Judicial Court, some established by legislation. Some are national organizations, NAPD, NLADA, NACTL, local bar organizations, and our affiliate organizations. Quick examples, Mass Bar had a conviction integrity working group, which was made up of a number of stakeholder agencies. And we were extremely pleased with what came out of that recommendation. And it was definitely friendly to what we were hoping to accomplish. And there was recent police reform legislation, without a doubt, not what everything that people wanted and what is needed, but there were some positive provisions in that legislation, and there were some commissions. And so we are on the law enforcement body camera working group, structural racism and probation group, facial technology study group. So I think there are a number of ways that public defender offices can get involved. And I say that knowing full well that there are a lot of programs that aren't appropriately funded, and they might not be able to do all the things that the three of us in our programs are able to do. And that, honestly, that is an example right there of structural racism, where public defender offices are not properly funded because they really don't want people to get an appropriate defense. And we are definitely lucky in Massachusetts where, for the most part, they have been pretty supportive of us.
Wow, that's a very impressive list, Mr. Benedetti. It's funny, not funny, but it makes me very grateful for this panel, because I'm here in Massachusetts and I'm familiar with CPCS, and we have collaboration with CPCS, and I wasn't even aware of all the amazing work that you do in the public safety space. So I am grateful that we have this chance to highlight that, and I hope this is not the end of being able to highlight these programs that you have very thoughtfully articulated.
Honestly, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt.
go ahead.
I just want to say that is on me, on us. in the creation of a communications position, that has helped us really make a difference to let people know we're out there. And like I said, doing all those different means of communication, whether it's on policy, whether it's highlighting the great work of our staff and our private attorneys, and whether trying to tell our client and client community stories.
Yes. So, Mr. Woods, I'll come to you. In light of what Mr. Benedetti has shared, can you share with us specifically the programs that your office has been involved in, particularly in this particular space? I'm not, if there's anything with regards to bail reform and the like, could you please highlight it for I know that 5 minutes doesn't do it enough justice, but could you at least highlight the important and maybe a little bit more about some of the struggles and challenges of really spearheading these programs in this particular space?
So I think bail reform is a good example. I might want to pull back and just talk about our office here. We are a traditional government public defender's office. So creating new programs, I think here is different and harder than say at the Bronx or the New York Defenders, where there's just more freedom because we work within a confined government structure. And I took over about eight years ago, and everything I tried to do here was to expand the thought process around a typical governor or government public defender's office or county office, and try to really incorporate or steal as much as I could from the New York Defender Service and Brooklyn Defenders, Bronx Defenders as possible, and bring it into our agency. So, for example, the addition of social workers was huge here because we historically did not have social workers. The addition of youth advocates, which were young recent college graduates who connected our clients with services like whether it be housing benefits, employment, whatever it would be, they served those gaps there. We created a program called LYRIC, which was Learn Your Rights in California, which is our high school outreach Know Your Rights program, where we're in the high schools in Oakland primarily, talking to young Black kids about their rights. When you come in contact with the police, this is how you serve them safely. So we've expanded a lot that way. We started our immigration program, and we were the first public defender's office in California to represent our clients in removal proceedings in immigration court. We started with one attorney, we've now expanded to 6. So those are some ways that we've done it. And I think finally, my one program that I think I'm probably the most proud of, which is different than really talking about public safety, but maybe more public voice, is our VOICE program, which stands for Voting Outreach Increases Community Empowerment. And so we go into jails in our county and register people to vote. We've registered over 1,300 people, and we keep doing it over and over again. We couldn't do it this year because of COVID, so we actually created a video with Brendon Woods from Ear Hustle and some other community organizers or activists, and we played that in the jail to get people registered to vote. So those are some of the ways, but I want to back up to the question in the beginning, and Porsha talked about this a little bit. The way we talk about community safety or public safety and the way that's defined needs a complete reshaping, because public safety, as it is defined right now, is public violence. It really is public violence, because public safety right now is centered around law enforcement, prosecution, and incarceration. That is what we think, or the public thinks, makes them safe. And so we've got to begin to re-image that and reimagine that, because those forces do not make our Black and brown communities any safer. They really don't.
Thank you so very much. That's really impressive, the program of trying to get folks who are incarcerated to vote. That's a very important program. Now, for the audience, I want to let you know that in about 5 minutes or so, I will be coming to you for questions. I know you have excellent questions that you would like to ask. I am assuming that we will put them in the chat, and that's how I will get to them. So if you would like to put them in the chat, I am getting out of my comfort zone here, navigating the chat. I usually don't read the chat when things are going, when I am doing one of these, but I promise you that my teenagers have trained me well enough to multitask while on Zoom. And so if you put your question in the chat, or as I usually do in my class, maybe if you use the raise hand function, I will be able to find you. That way you can actually ask your question in your own voice. And as I scroll through, I see, I want to welcome Federal Public Defender Miriam Conrad to the program. Miriam, it's good to see you. And my colleague Aditi Goyal, it's really good to see you both. All right, so Ms. Venable, one of the questions highlighted by Mr. Woods' response was this idea of sort of, he comes from a very structured public defender office. Some officers have leeway to do and accomplish, very creative ways of doing public defense. So my question for you is, could you highlight very specifically some of the things that Bronx defenders are doing in the space of community safety? But I also want to ask you, what suggestions do you have for those officers where they don't have the same resources, or they don't have the same support, to be, what can they do, although they're hampered by these challenges? What can they do to still have a voice and a stake in this space where generally public defenders don't find themselves?
So I guess your first question is a little easier than your second. In terms of what Bronx Defenders is doing specifically, I mean, we are a part of all of the macro and micro litigation that happens in New York that directly impacts communities of color. We were absolutely on the front lines for marijuana legislation. We're super excited. While the legislation is not perfect, it is one of the most comprehensive legislative bills in the country. We were at the forefront of bail reform and push back often, even while, Governor Cuomo use people's sort of eyes being diverted to the pandemic to change significantly the bail laws, reverting a lot of the hard work so many community organizers worked really hard for. We were at the forefront of Ban the Box, which was a legislation that passed that discouraged employers from running criminal backgrounds before they actually gave people a real chance for employment. So those are the types of things, the obvious, we register people to vote. And what we're really trying to do, once again, is hear directly from the community how they want to engage, how they want us to sort of advocate and show up for them. I understand, like I said, that lawyers feel like because we have the legal expertise, we should be at the forefront of the movement. And Bronx Defenders has taken the opposite approach. We put those that are directly impacted at the forefront. Before we engage in any policy, we actually meet with community members and community organizers to hear directly from them. We don't have all the answers, Sway. We just don't. And that's the beginning and the end of it. I was a social worker long before I was a lawyer. So I look at how I engage with my community because I'm born, raised, and residing here. So this is both personal for me and it's just different, right? We do have the resources to engage. We do have the leeway to be creative. For example, part of why I came back to Bronx Defenders for the fourth time was because, jury selection and people engaging in jury service is a passion of mine as well as Mr. Woods. And one of the things that I think that public defenders and public defender offices often fail at is educating the community on their power to nullify. And so that's a huge part of what I want to do. In educating communities on this power that they don't really know that they have, right? And Bronx Defenders has the leeway to allow me to do that within the confines of keeping my bar card, of course. So So, you know, those are the types of things that we are able to do because we are not restricted in the ways that Mr. Woods highlighted. Then the second question, you know, it's interesting. We actually get asked that question almost every day. You know, how do you advise offices that don't necessarily have the resources? You know, I'm lucky. You know, Justine Olderman leads from the top down, and she's an example of, you know, what a person that I would want to continuously work for a long time is. You know, she supports us in what it is we do, and she allows us to be creative. So even if you don't have a social worker in your office, you should be encouraging as a leader your lawyers to think beyond the criminal case, to think about the enmeshed consequences, because an arrest is not just an arrest, right? It has incredible ripple effects on the individual you're representing's life. And so I think it's vital for leaders in public defender spaces, even if you can't afford a social worker, to at the very least encourage your staff to be thinking about the enmeshed consequences of an arrest. If that is the type of, if you have a, you know, civil legal services organization, having folks think about, it's not just the criminal case. And I feel like, you know, criminal defense organizations fail miserably when you don't think about and train your lawyers to think about the idea that maybe your client's freedom is not at the forefront of their mind. Maybe they don't give a damn about their freedom if they don't know where their babies are, if they've been taken as a result of an arrest. Maybe they don't care about their freedom if they are going to be sent back to a country where they have no family and they don't speak the language. Maybe they could not care less about their freedom if they're going to get out and not have a job or a home to live in. And so I think, you know, even if you don't have a social worker, or even if you don't have a family defense lawyer, at the very least, you should be talking to and training your staff about the things that are separate, that are, you know, that come with having an arrest. I don't know if I articulated that very well. I'm sorry, guys. I'm fasting for Ramadan, so I'm hungry and tired, but I think you get the point.
Yes, we get the point. You made yourself very clear. I think that's exactly what client-centered representation looks like when the client's needs what shapes the representation. Okay, so thank you so very much, panelists. I am transitioning now to that portion of our programming where we are going to take questions from the audience. Left to me, we can talk all night, but that is not the point. The point here is we are going to go to our audience, and we will take questions. So I see that I have a Andrew D'Amato.
Hello.
And so, yes, if you could ask your question, sir.
Hi, Dehlia. I don't know if you remember me. I was a Gideon's Promise intern from 2013. It's great to see you again.
Yes.
So I'm really glad
Andrew,
at the end. Yeah, I'm really glad at the end there you guys brought that up, because I mean, my experience in Louisville, working there with the caseload, was so extreme.
Yes.
And I was really curious to ask Porsha about what happened, because from my view, one thing and this is my question to the group, is just unionization has been a huge thing in public defense last year. Like, I know Philadelphia got unionized. I know Bronx just got unionized about 8 months ago. And I think Massachusetts too has some legislation that's going on around unionization as well with the office. And I don't have the answer as far as each state is different, but for me, it makes a lot of sense that when you frame just the labor hours against the caseload numbers, it's where you can get cases at least to some level to reasonableness, instead of being in the hundreds that it can be in all these different offices in the country. So I'm just curious, I want to ask the panel, just what are their thoughts on unions and public defense, and that is a solution to solve these caseload crises and workload crises that we see in public defense throughout the country.
I'll address that. We're lucky in Massachusetts that we have a statute. When the organization was created in 1984, the statute gave the committee. We have a 15-member committee. At the time, the 15 members were appointed by the court. Now it's a mix of the governor, the Speaker of the House, the Senate President appoint 2 each, and then the court appoints the rest. But it's in our statute that they decide what the appropriate caseloads are. And the people who were involved in creating that statute, the legislators who supported it, quite frankly, are heroes, because that really makes us different than so many programs. And I always like to remember that. And so there, as you said, has been legislation pending for a number of years. There was legislation pending when I was a line attorney. I don't want to say public defender, because I am always a public defender no matter what I'm doing, even if I'm not in court. And our committee's big concern was, and they said this to the legislature, our big issue is, before you do it, you really want to study it, because we have a great statute and we just don't want to mess that up. But in terms of what I was able to do, certainly one of the big issues was staff salaries. And so that has always been a focus, but we pretty much put aside everything else except the staff salaries and the private attorney pay to really make the case that we had to do something about staff salaries. We were successful. The legislature gave us money. We've moved our starting salary from 40 to 61.5, has made a huge difference. But what we also did was, after we were able to do that, we did a staff survey. And in my message to the staff, I said, look, I know it's not all about money. There are other reasons that make an organization a good place to practice. What are those things? This is what this survey is designed to get at. And let me see what I can do. And so that may not directly answer your question. I do think we're a little different because our caseloads are much better. But I also wanted to try and get at some of those other things that are some of the reasons, anyway, that people want to unionize. And hopefully the staff appreciates it. I completely understand if they want to continue to unionize. I think one of the big reasons is that we're not guaranteed a regular salary increase like people who are, or staff who are in the union. So I hope that was helpful.
I just briefly, does the fiscal year budget like that, that's one thing that I've always been wondering with public defender systems too. Would a union do anything to prevent that whole risk of like the year-to-year budget issue that I know a lot of public defender offices can deal with, as far as like just the gaps in funding?
I don't know if you want me to address that.
Any of the panelists can answer that question.
So I don't know if so to your first question, as public defenders, we don't divorce ourselves from our desire for equity and justice and fairness, whether we are in the courtroom or outside of the courtroom. So whatever is required to get equity, whatever is required to get fairness, I'm super in favor of. Union is totally fine. And whatever is going to get equity and fairness for my colleagues and my clients, I'm down for. And I think to your second question, honestly, I'm not 100% sure what the answer to that is. So I'm not, I don't even want to act like I do, because I don't know the answer to that question.
I'm going to jump in real quickly. I think it depends on your locale where you're located. Every union, every office runs a little bit differently. Our union here has been very good with regards to getting pay increases. We work in collaboration together. We've had pay equity with the DA's office forever. So I think our attorneys get paid fairly well. When it comes to caseload, they haven't had much of an impact on caseloads or workload within the office. There are offices that are unionized in California that have outrageously high caseloads and some that have great caseloads. I think as the leader of the office, it's incumbent upon me to make sure my attorneys are properly resourced to do the job. And so that comes down on me. And I think I'm fortunate to work in the Bay Area where it's fairly liberal. I do say fairly because nowhere near as liberal as it should be, fairly liberal light, where we're able to get some things done. And my staff has resources, but not where there need to be where it's completely equal or even close to what the prosecutors have. Not even close.
So Andrew, thank you so very much for that question. And it's good to see you. It's amazing that to see just what Gideon's Promise with John Rapping has produced over the years. So good to see you. There's a question in the chat that I absolutely love, and I can't wait for you all to answer it. And so the question is, why did you become a public defender? I think curious minds want to know. And that question was posed by Matthew. Why did you first decide to be a public defender?
Well, you know, my mother has been the biggest inspiration in my life, not because she baked me cookies and she came to parent-teacher conferences, but because she was a crack addict. And I watched my entire childhood, my grandmother struggle and be funneled through criminal legal systems. I watched her struggle and be funneled through child welfare systems. I watched her, you know, struggle and be funneled through administrative welfare proceedings. And, you know, I saw the impact that it had on her. I felt the impact that it had on me. And, you know, as I came home from school every single day, you know, Black men and women in my neighborhood, even as a little girl, I watched them on their knees be, you know, searched and harassed by police. And so for all of those reasons sort of culminated into me first becoming a social worker and then ultimately becoming a public defender. Thank you
for sharing and being so transparent with that answer. Mr. Woods?
Yeah, I have a flipper answer, just like kind of being Black in America. It's like those experiences you see growing up, whether it be family members that were incarcerated, whether it would be the way you were treated by the police yourself. So for me, it was probably just more than anything else, seeing the way the system impacted members of my family, whether it be my uncle who helped raise me doing 27 years in prison, whether it be my other cousins who were incarcerated, just seeing the human caging system and seeing what it does to Black and brown people is why I do this work. I figured if I was going to be fortunate enough to, you know, get through high school, get through college, get through law school, this is the work I was going to do. It's being there with someone in that moment when they need your help and pushing back against the state, making sure your client has a voice, making sure your client's not incarcerated or caged or jailed. Those are the reasons why. And if there aren't people in positions, and I'm gonna say frankly, that look like me also fighting for people who look like me, the system will continue to destroy people who look like me. So that is why. And I want to add to that, I love what I do. There are great days, there are shitty days, there are terrible days, but this job, just being able to fight for people is completely fulfilling. And I 100% love what I do. It's been over 20 years now, and I can't get enough of this job. I love it. So.
Preach, brother, preach. Mr. Benedetti.
My answer is definitely, or my story, I guess, is definitely not as interesting. In some respects, mine has been more of a journey. It really came down to, and others have told me this, just not liking when I saw people being not treated fairly, you know, even when I was younger. And so that leads me to become a public defender. But I have to say that like you know, my two co-panelists, I love the job, and the more I've spent doing it, whether it is representing individuals in cases and seeing how unfair the system is, because I grew up certainly not exposed to that, like probably most of white America. You know, we see one side of law enforcement. You know, we don't see the side that both Porsha and Brendon have experienced. And then getting into the policy and trying to change laws and getting frustrated when people don't see why the laws are unfair, and when it doesn't affect them or people who look like them or people in their neighborhoods, and then becoming the chief and you know, having the same kinds of battles. I mean, one way to put it is, and I said this, I think, at one of the last staff meetings we had in person with our managers. Every so often you come to work and you get pissed off about something that happens, and it just energizes you again, you know, to keep up the fight.
So thank you all for that answer. I wanted to chime in because I think I'll be remiss if I didn't share that for me, one of the greatest joys I have is when people ask my teenagers, two of them, what does your mommy do? And the first thing they say, she's a public defender, right? And it's interesting because they could say she's a law professor, she's a teacher, but they go to the public defender because thankfully I still stay so much with the work. Yesterday I came home and I was saying to my daughter, I said, I was in court in Plymouth with a 18-year-old, and I said, he is 14 days younger than you are, right? And this is the reason why I continue to fight for him. When I was in court about 2 weeks ago in front of a judge who will remain unnamed, but is a mean-spirited person and has no business being on the bench. His name starts with an S, and he's at the BMC Central. His last name starts with an S, and is at the BMC Central. I brought in a client. I went to the shelter to find said client who has a warrant, a woman who is a veteran and has struggled with addiction, and brought her. Literally, we Ubered her, right? My social worker Ubered her to the courthouse. I negotiated with the prosecutors to bring her in on this warrant. We had letters from all her support people. And what did this judge do? Didn't care about anything, but instead, right, asked that she be held on a warrant, on a bail, 500. She's homeless. How the hell is she gonna pay $500? So I'm running to the ATM to get her out so that she doesn't spend the night in jail. And my whole day, right, from the minute I walked her into that courtroom till I got her out of jail at 7:30 p.m. South Bay and got her out, well, I think somebody had used the word pissed off. I was mad as hell, right? And it's that which fuels me. I have one of my students gave me a plaque that says, wake up, kick ass, rinse and repeat. That is the reason I became a public defender. That, in addition to the fact that I had my brother in England got caught up in the system, and trying to find somebody to tell his story, to explain that Alex was a kid who, in spite of his mistakes, needed a chance. And at age 19, going from place to place in Aylesbury and Leicester and Manchester and Birmingham, and not being able to find anyone, but finally ended up with someone from legal aid, and the indifference with which they treated my brother, I vowed that I will always be a voice for the voiceless. And that's how I became a public defender. And it's besides being a mom, it's one of my greatest titles is being a public defender, because I wake up every morning pissed off, angry about something that keeps me going. I see a question from Martina that says, we are in a moment now where we can impact policing practices. And so the question is, what are your thoughts on how your offices and how public defenders can help bring about large-scale reform of policing agencies? Whoever wants to start off with that question. Mr. Woods? Oh, Mr. Benedetti, that's fine.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mentioned there was the police reform legislation, and we were able to get a seat on a number of the the commissions or the committees that were put together. And so that's certainly one way that we hope to make some change. And I don't want to pretend that that's major change. We still need a lot more. But also, we're doing everything we can to look. We're doing a lot more training at looking at cases or advising our staff, attorneys, and our private attorneys to look at cases through a racial justice lens. We're looking at ways to see if we can build our own Brady list of police officers who lie. And so I think that's one thing we're focused on, is looking not only at individual cases, but looking at ways that we can go at the problems that have been talked about this afternoon in a systemic way.
Ms. Venable or Mr. Woods?
So I'm an abolitionist, full disclosure. I don't know if you got that.
We did.
Towards the work that is directed at abolition, and I understand that there are differing perspectives on abolition and sort of what that looks like. But based on our conversations with community and as well as just personally my principles, our relationship with the police is over. And I think, if you look at it from the perspective of any toxic relationship that you are in, there comes a time when you have done everything you could to reform it. There comes a time where you've spoken to your partner and you've let them know how their actions and behaviors have made you feel, but you in essence go so far left that you can't make it right. And that is what it seems that has become of our relationship with police. It just cannot be reformed. You've put in so many policies, you've put in body cameras, you've codified the fact that that citizens can record them. You've done all of this, given them money in order for them to be better trained, and they still can't get it right. They still slaughter babies, women, men. Like, it's still happening every single day. So a lot of me and my colleagues' focus, not Bronx defenders as a whole, want to make sure that's out there, is, litigating the hell out of our cases, not just from a racial justice lens, but with the message of what you're not about to do is come into this community, take this person's liberty, take this person's babies, take this person's citizenship, home, or job without a hell of a fight. And so all of that is sort of what we do at the same time.
But Ms. Venable, is that a realistic approach, right? Because people tell me, for me, for example, I am like, look, that's wonderful when you have the time and energy. I, on the other hand, have an 18-year-old who I need to go argue a motion to suppress. I have a 45-year-old client who I need to get her to the methadone clinic today and get her in compliance, or she's going to be revoked and held. I don't have neither the time nor the bandwidth to say this relationship with the police is over. Is your viewpoint a very pragmatic and practical one, right? Given that we live in a society that's so divided, the chasm, the fissure between what we can even agree on is so large that when I hear people with your view, I'm like, how realistic is this, right?
And that's a fair question, and it's one that I often get. And so I think that the question though presupposes that both can't be true. As if I somehow cannot fight for my clients, because that was actually the second part of my response, which was I litigate the hell out of my cases, and what the police, prosecutors, and judge are not going to do is run over my client. And so the ideologies are not mutually exclusive. And I think that when people hear the word abolition, it is because we've lived our whole lives this one way. So what? So what? Just because you've been doing something a certain way doesn't make it right. does not make it right. Just because I was a rude and disrespectful 18-year-old doesn't make it right that I'm that way at 39. So what? That's the way that I've been doing it. But the other piece, though, that I would like to propose is, do you feel safe right now? You have children, you got Black children. So regardless of whether or not you think my way is pragmatic, what you do have for sure, what we do know for certain is that police are going to kill another Black person. And so the question is not whether or not what I'm saying is pragmatic. The question is do you feel safer right now? And if your response to that is no, if you worry when your Black babies leave your home, if your response to that is yes, then you may want to rethink. You may want to retry what I'm proposing. And that's all that I'm saying. No one is saying stop fighting for your clients. That's the polar opposite of what I'm saying. I'm not saying stop engaging. You must. I clocked in and I signed up. Justine Olderman, thank you for paying me bi-weekly for showing up and doing what it is that I love to do. But what I am also saying is that doesn't make us free, and that doesn't make us safe. I don't have children. And so all that I'm saying is that if you do, I urge you to try to think about the way that we have been doing things may not be the right way.
So Ms. Venable, I have to push back because that's my job as moderator, right? I have 2 Black children, which means that I am constantly having those conversations. I am constantly on my knees praying and fasting. I am constantly checking up on them because they are Black children living in this world, right? And I am constantly fighting like hell because I want change. But what I also want folks, people in the choir to understand, and what I teach my students, for example, you need to be able to defend a position because the people that come to the table don't share your same view, right? Because if they did, we will have been in a different space by now, right? And so let me broaden that up and see if anybody else wanted to chime in on what reforms we can take with regard to policing, given the moment in which we find ourselves.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in real quickly. For anyone who says what Porsche has described as not a reasonable approach, let's look at what occurred or what was happening 400 years ago. My Black ass would not be here in front of you 400 years ago. People did not think it was a reasonable approach for me to be anything but a slave 400 years ago, okay? So there was a divided nation back then who thought Black people were inferior and could do nothing else. People then had no concept of what Black people could do now. It was a foreign concept. So when it comes to realistic
they still think that, by the way, just so you know.
You're right. You're right. When it comes to realistic approaches, we have to have solutions other than policing and other than human caging, other than prisons. When it comes to the specific topic of policing, even within what I'm going to call their own structures, there are things we can do. We talk about a decertification process. Every state should have a way in which a police officer can be fired and not be allowed to be a police officer in any other jurisdiction. If I get disbarred, I can't go be a lawyer someplace else. If you get fired as a cop, you should not be able to go over to the next county and work. That should not happen. There has to be.
Mayor Rice got killed. Mm-hmm.
There has to be civilian review boards in each city with the ability to hire and fire police. You have to give those review boards teeth and power. And they got to be civilian run. If you look at any police agency within the United States, I'm convinced that they can be defunded, okay? Their budgets are huge, they are oversized, and the way they spend their money is not making anyone safer. They should not be responding to traffic stops. They should not be responding to mental health issues, okay? That money needs to be reinvested back into the community. I am convinced. You give me any police department budget in the United States, I can take off 50% of any budget right now. I'm convinced. And finally, police should not be allowed to carry firearms, period. just period.
So we do that in England. Our police officers do not carry firearms. And it is the reason why maybe 2 people lose their lives at the hand of police officers a year in England, Mr. Benedetti. And then I have to turn to Professor Smith for a question.
Sure. I just want to follow up on what Brendon said and bring down to what's going on in Massachusetts to maybe give people a sense of what is possible. I think some people here might be familiar with a recent study that was done in Suffolk County, which illustrated that declining to prosecute certain low-level crimes actually led to less crime overall, that not prosecuting people, or not arresting people meant that people arrested, they don't prosecute, it meant they were far less likely in the future to commit crimes. And then we see in Baltimore, where the DA decided to stop prosecuting low-level crimes as a response to COVID. Lo and behold, they're now realizing it actually did not lead to an increase in crime, and they're going to do it permanently. So those are 2 examples of something we have been doing for a while. In particular, the CPCS budget, 70% is spent on misdemeanors. And I don't want to suggest that there are certainly some serious cases that end up in district court, but 70% of our entire budget is misdemeanors. And we know for the most part, it's behavior that's happening in communities of color and poor people. And they don't necessarily go to jail, but they get a record, even if it's no first offense. Sometimes it can be on their record. And that's an example where you could take some of that money and put it into the exact kind of programs and social supports that Brendon and Porsche are talking about, because it's millions of dollars.
All right, thank you all so very much. Our time, unfortunately, has come to an end. It has been my pleasure and honor to have shared our thoughts with each other and journeyed with you during this conversation. Please join me in thanking our wonderful panelists. Professor Smith, I will turn it over to you because you have your hand raised.
Well, you just closed this down, so I can't ask my question now, can I?
Of course, you are a host. I will make an exception. I will reopen this case for you to enter that piece of evidence.
There you go. I really appreciate it. I do. I have a question. So it's been inspiring hearing you all talk about your commitment to your clients, your passion about the issues that shape their lives. But what I think we probably, generally speaking, know to be true is that poor clients and clients of color don't always feel loved by their public defenders, right? They often feel very unloved. And in bringing this point up, I'm reminded of some new research by Matthew Clare. Just came out with a book, Privilege and Punishment, where he talks about, he is a Harvard sociology PhD. He's now a Stanford assistant professor. Amazing book and other articles. And what he points out is that for clients of color and poor clients, they often have very troubled relationships with their public defenders. There's a lack of trust, and that shapes how they engage with them. And you could understand the lack of trust. The public defenders are under certain pressures, and it makes it so that they engage in particular ways. But it leads these clients to go elsewhere to find legal advice. They go study themselves, they find out from family members and friends, they bring it to the courtroom, they bring it to their PDs, and it creates a really tense relationship that ends up being a disservice to those clients. And Matthew Clare, argues that this fundamentally shapes their experience and leads to much poorer outcomes relative to people who can hire out, who could just sit back and just let their attorneys do whatever. I trust you. It's not the case for poor people and people of color, right? Can you, as much as I love the talk about your love, there's another reality it seems like we should be talking about, which connects to this broader question about how communities are served. Can you speak to this really important issue that Claire brings up? Thank you so much.
Ms. Smith, I was actually just on a panel with Matthew about 2 weeks ago to discuss his book, Privilege and Punishment. It's an exceptional book, and it actually takes place, obviously, in Massachusetts. He shadows and engages with some of the clients of some CPCS workers, attorneys. And, you know, if anyone sort of in this group has heard of or read the work of Matthew Clare, he absolutely believes in abolition. And he believes that our courts need to be abolished. And like I said, the relationship that we have with these entities, that the courts, you know, simply are a vessel, are a vehicle for the violence that police and prosecutors visit on communities of color. And so and public defenders can sometimes, you know, even with the best intentions, act in a way to also be a vessel of that. And so what we need to be thinking about, and I'll end this statement the way I began, is reimagining how we think about being public defenders and putting our clients at the forefront of this work. So in the book, you know, the one recurring theme is that clients did not feel heard, or that attorneys could have taken an extra second to explain a principle of law to them, or an extra second to explain a legal maneuver. And that could have been the difference in their relationship. I encourage every public defender, anyone who's thinking about being a public defender, to read this book, because oftentimes the conversation centers around us. That book centers around our clients.
I'm actually just starting to read that book, and I probably shouldn't admit this, but I didn't realize he had done the research in Boston. So without even reading the whole book, like I said very early on, it's troubling to me. It's not something, I guess, that is surprising in terms of how he frames it, because you're right. Why would somebody who is being represented by an attorney that is being paid by the government trust their attorney? And that's just one challenge. But we're looking at ways in which we can get client feedback after the process. I mentioned some of the ways we do community engagement, and that's an area that is a priority of ours as well, figuring out how to do it in all our different offices around the state for the exact reasons that all of us have talked about. But then figuring out after the fact, how can we get a sense of whether somebody felt, no matter the outcome. I mean, clearly the outcome is gonna influence in some cases how people felt about their representation, but did they feel heard? Did they feel respected? Did they feel listened to? Did they feel the attorney truly represented what they wanted represented? And like you said at the beginning, Porsha, it may not be, I don't want to, you know, the issue for the person might not be, I don't want to go to jail. It could be something else. And so admittedly, we haven't figured out how to do that statewide, but it's definitely a priority of ours to get client feedback.
I'm going to add one piece to that real quickly. No, I haven't read the book. I hadn't heard about it. So I'm about to order it on Amazon right now. I think it comes down to, in some part, just basic fundamental resources. I don't care how dedicated of a public defender you are. I don't care how down you are for the cause, how much you love your clients. If you have 400 cases sitting on your desk, you can't do the damn job. You can't do it. So mass incarceration exists for a reason. If you look at the budgets of any public agency or county budget, city government, whatever, you're going to see massive resources put into caging, prosecution, incarceration, policing, as compared to what is put into the one government agency there to fight mass incarceration. There's no funding there, lots of funding there. So you get to that basic concept. That's how you get to the situation we're at, where the community does not trust us. So if you pull back and think about the Constitution, which I have my issues with all the time, but there is a right to a defense. There is no right to prosecution. So fund it accordingly. Fund it accordingly. So that's my final piece there.
I'm going to end it
Yeah.
there, except to ask that you don't buy it on Amazon, but that's just my preference.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll even buy it for you if we don't buy it on Amazon. Thank you all for this was such an incredible panel. We appreciate you so much. I've learned so much from you all. I will likely stay in touch with you all. The work that you're doing is amazing and inspiring, despite the lack of resources in some instances. I am in awe. We will be in touch. Thank you very much. Have a good evening, you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.